Hello, good morning, everyone, to this new episode of our Sales and Leadership podcast with Simon and Wajid. Today, we are going to talk about an interesting topic, and we are bringing something from the sales leadership perspective or leadership in general. I know in the past we have spoken about leadership, we have touched upon some of the key leadership traits and leadership qualities that would enable the salesperson, the sales team, or the sales organization to grow both organically and both in terms of as an individual or as an organization. So we're gonna go deep dive today. Stay with us. It's about 15 minutes bite-sized podcast that we are bringing every week. Please stay with us and share your thoughts and comments towards as we go along in the podcast and also towards the end of the session. Again, my name is Wajid Ali and I'm based in Toronto, Canada. With me is my partner and co-host Simon. So I will bring him on for his quick introduction, and then we will go and have a deep dive into this topic of today. Simon,
Excellent.
you're up.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Wajid, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this Sales Leadership podcast today. I am Simon Rodriguez, and I'm based in Calgary, Western Canada. And as Wajid mentioned, we look forward to sharing some of the insights and some of the experiences that we have accumulated throughout our sales journey. And today we have an interesting topic, which is going to be those key traits that we have seen in sales leadership in particular. And it's an interesting topic because oftentimes we see top sales performers moving into leadership, and in most cases there is no enough coaching or support from the organization into making sure that transition goes well. And what I mean by that is normally when you look at the traits of a sales leader, those are beyond your typical individual contributor traits. Those are things like coaching, trust, elements that you need to work with your team to ensure that they are set up for success. So that's what's going to be covering today. That's going to be the focus of today's discussion. But before we go into the traits in particular, Wajid, I wanted to ask you, in your view, what's needed? I mean, what's the gap? Because again, it's typical to see maybe a top sales performer going into leadership from an individual contributor into leading a team. But in your view, in your experience, what's the current gap that maybe organizations are not providing these sales leaders transitioning from a contributor to a leadership role?
Yeah, I agree with you, Simon. It is something that is perhaps being missed in a lot of organizations because I think it goes two ways. When I look at it, the organizations, from the organization perspective, what they think is, this guy or this person is doing really well into his or her current role. He's a stellar performer, and he or she's the right candidate for being promoted and make them a leader, right? So what they think is that, and then perhaps they feel like since this person is doing so well, once we promote the person to a leadership role, would essentially do the same thing and be a great leader in that role. So they kind of expect everything from this person to do the research, to do the coaching and self-training and be a self-starter and things like that. So that's the expectations from, I guess, from the perspective of an organization. But if you look at it from the perspective of that individual who has been promoted or who is being considered to be promoted, that person kind of feels the other ways. He or she feels that, hey, now if I get promoted, I expect from the organization to provide me some coaching, some mentorship, some training so that I can be equipped and be a great leader. So I feel like there's a gap because there are expectations from both sides, from the person who is being promoted and also from the organization who are kind of already being in the mindset of, hey, this person is the right fit and perhaps doesn't need any further training. So I'll take a pause here and I'll see what you think and how would you reflect upon this perspective.
The one thing I will add, and I share your view in terms of expectations. That's to me also the starting point is having clear expectations, because what I've seen and what I've found is most sales leaders transitioning from a contributor role into a leadership role. One of the main things I've seen is, number one, is they keep the same focus of, or that mindset of a short-term approach. Okay, it's about this next quarter, and then they kind of they don't have that long-term strategic mindset or view, which in my it's essential to lead a team, right? So that's number one of the things, expectations, but also ensuring that there is a change in the mindset in the terms of how you're approaching sales leadership. It's not about the necessary about the short term focus, is also about collaboration. It's about inspiring your team to achieve more, right? So you can see your team as a way to scale, as a force multiplier, and a way to get into that ultimate goal that you have. So I think expectations is important, as you described, Wajid. And maybe we can start with the first topic. I think it's important, which is we barely touched on, which is trust and inspiration, right? So why trust is so important? Maybe as an individual contributor, you were used to just focus on your own thing, control your destiny, for a better term. But when you're leading a team, you need to inspire that work. You need to build that trust so the team can be successful. And what's your, yeah, I'm curious about your take on this. I know trust, not only in sales, but in general, is an essential component of leadership, and it's an essential element, right? But in your view, in your experience with it, how trust has been instrumental and fundamental into leading successful teams? What's the role that you see trust playing in sales leadership?
Yes, this topic that you brought up here, I guess, is the first of the five key leadership traits that we are going to discuss. And I'm glad and happy that we are touching up on this one as a first, call it stepping stone, because without having trust and without having any kind of inspiration, if you're missing that thing, I guess perhaps you need to go back to your drawing board and consider your leadership abilities, because if you're not able to develop a trust in your team members, if you're not able to inspire them for whatever reason, it could be something intrinsic within you, or it could be some external elements that is causing you having those kind of self-doubts or doubts within your team, then I feel like you need to go back to the drawing board and start looking into what is it that you can do to bring that key trait back into your leadership style. And the way I look at it, most of the people are good at it. Most of the leaders that I've worked with, they are really good in creating that trust and inspiration within their team. But then there are some people who perhaps need some more coaching and some more mentoring and training when it comes to working with the team. So to your point, that person might be a great individual contributor, but when it gets promoted during that transition or maybe afterwards, they didn't get that exposure, that training, or they didn't get connected or attached to a mentor, to somebody that can look up to and take that inspiration and trust from them. And I will just stop by saying that if you don't have trust and leadership within your team members, I feel like you as an organization, you'll not be able to see consistent growth.
Certainly, we did. No, and that's it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the books I really enjoy is it's a book by Stephen Covey, and the title of the book is The Speed of Trust, and it talks about not only sales but in general for organizations to be successful and to navigate challenges, hardships. One of the key elements is trust, right? And when there is trust in place, things go way different. It goes a long way when you empower your team and then you trust on their capabilities to accomplish a particular objective. And I think that's essential, and it helped us shift into the second trait, which is the mindset. And that's a mindset that we change from an individual contributor into now a mentor, a teacher. So you change that approach, that mindset, versus being, let's say, comparing the initial seller, that top performer, now leading the team, inspiring the team, building that trust, and ensuring they have all the different elements to succeed. Now, that's the second topic we have, and that's the shift in mindset and changing from an individual contributor to a sales leader. It's an interesting one because it's difficult, right? It's difficult just to change. Just okay, I'll just change the way I'm thinking, the way I'm approaching, just by transitioning to a new role. But that's important to have a specific mindset and approach on helping your team to become successful. And I'm curious, for someone transitioning with it from a contributor into a leadership role now in sales, what will be your recommendation in terms of establishing that mindset and perhaps becoming a coach, a trainer, as opposed to that individual contributor? What will be your main recommendation from that perspective?
Yeah, what I would recommend as a starting point would be to have an open mind, because if you are already coming with an open mind to any new role, meaning that you're open to learning, you're open to learn from your experiences and maybe from your mistakes, because when you're in any role, sometimes you do make mistakes. Mistakes could be, as I said, could be intrinsic or could be external. But if you have an open mindset and you learn from those experiences, it could be wins or losses. So from both you learn, and then you adapt, and then you go back to your call it a reflection board, where you reflect upon what went well, what didn't went well. If you have a conflict between you and your team members, you need to take a time to process that, and then you need to come with an open-minded approach, understanding that the perspective of your team member as well. Because at times what happens with the title, leadership again is, people sometimes take this as a title. And when you look at it from the title perspective, what happened is you start thinking of being commanding and controlling mindset. You feel like if I command, I would control. And in today's world, it's not going to work. So you need to have an open mind. You need to come up uh, with an open mind when you are on the table talking to your team members. And that's what I would recommend as a starting point. There are so many other things we can talk about it, but I feel like that's something you would consider when you're transitioning from your individual contributor to a leadership role.
Yeah, no, well said, Wajid. I think those are really good takes. What I will add is a couple of things. One is encouraging independence as well. Like we might have that approach or that old mindset in said, okay, well, let's, if we want to get things done, we'll just do it myself. This is the way I will do things if you're leading a team. But now you need to give your team that space, right? To you set up you define the goals, and then you give them that independence for them to go their way and accomplish that goal. You set expectations. One thing I like as well is providing a space and even embracing sometimes failure. And what I mean by that is giving that open space for people to try their best, to do their effort, and it's okay to fail. There's that failing basically fast and approach, right? In terms of
Right.
you try something, if it didn't work, you revisit, you make changes. But with that, I think you build confidence as well with your team. You're giving them that opportunity, that you're trusting their judgment and their approach into achieving things. So that's why I think it's important. Changing that mindset is not easy, as you mentioned. It requires to shift from your previous role into now scaling into leading that team. But I think with that we're covering those main two traits in this first session. I know we'll have more time in the next one to cover the additional traits that we have. But any parting thoughts, any additional comments, Wajid, before we wrap it up?
You just said it, Simon. It's something that we are still going to continue in the next session to kind of wrap it up. So just stay with us for the new session, which will be for the next weekend. Up until then, take care of yourself, and we'll be back with the last episode to wrap it up. Thank you, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, everyone.